I have reviewed Senator Sessions' full record, his testimony, his responses, and his lack of responses to the follow-up questions that my colleagues and I sent to him. And I respectfully say that I cannot support his nomination. At his confirmation hearing, Senator Sessions simply said that he would follow the law, that he would enforce the law, that he would respect the law. But he must be a leader, not just a follower. At the hearing and in their public comments afterward, our Republican colleagues have worked to make the case that Senator Sessions has no personal animosity toward minority groups. And I have no doubt that's the case. But Senator Sessions' personal feelings are not what's at issue here. In protecting constitutional rights and liberties and pursuing justice, he must be a champion. And Senator Sessions' record demonstrates a hostility and antipathy, in fact, even strong opposition to civil rights and voting rights, women's health care and privacy rights, anti-discrimination measures, religious freedom safeguards. He has prided himself on vociferous opposition to comprehensive immigration reform legislation, a measure that passed the United States Senate with 68 votes, a bipartisan majority. And he has opposed a criminal justice reform bill that has attracted a group of 25 co-sponsors, Republicans as well as Democrats. He even split with the majority of his own party to vote against reauthorizing the Violence Against Women Act, demonstrating in the reasons that he articulated antipathy to important elements of these rights and protection. He opposed hate crime prohibition. Senator Sessions' views and positions have been out of the mainstream, and there is nothing in his record, including his testimony before this committee, that indicates he will be the constitutional champion that all of us, Republicans and Democrats, value in the Attorney General. Speaking truth to power is important when it comes to conflicts of interest. President Trump's vast business holdings, and he has repeatedly refused to divest himself from them, present an unprecedented threat of conflict of interest. Should conflicts arise, the Attorney General must be willing to maintain impartiality, including appointing a special counsel or independent prosecutor, if necessary. We can all imagine scenarios when this step might be necessary, and to commit broadly to these principles is necessary from the next Attorney General. And yet, when I asked Senator Sessions about enforcement of cases against illegal conflicts of interest involving the President and his family, such as violations of the Emoluments Clause and the Stock Act, he equivocated. When I asked him about appointing a special counsel to investigate criminal wrongdoing at Deutsche Bank, which is owed more than $300 million by President Trump, he equivocated. When I asked him about the investigation of Russian hacking, he equivocated. Senator Durbin has rightly pointed out the failing that that equivocation represents. His answers to follow-up questions have been no better. These answers give me no confidence that he will be the independent, non-political enforcer against conflicts of interest and official self-enrichment that the nation needs at a moment when this administration faces ethical and legal controversy that are unprecedented in scope and scale, as is the President's wealth. Senator Sessions' record over many years, failed to demonstrate his core convictions and commitments necessary in the next Attorney General. He has failed to be that unshakable ethical voice that we need at this moment and that is necessary to protect and defend our Constitution. Back in 1986, the Judiciary Committee rejected Senator Sessions' nomination to a federal judgeship due to remarks he made and actions he took in a position of public trust as United States Attorney in Alabama. My judgment about this nomination is not based primarily on his record before then. It is on his record since. On voting rights, Senator Sessions has often condoned barriers to Americans exercising their franchise. He has been a leading opponent of provisions in the Voting Rights Act designed to assure that African Americans can vote in places like his home state of Alabama, which has a unique history of racial segregation, and he's advocated for needlessly restrictive and draconian voter ID laws, citing utterly debunked threats of rampant voter fraud as an excuse for curtailing the real and legitimate rights of entire groups of voters. He regarded a court decision in Shelby as good news in striking down some of those key provisions. On privacy, Senator Sessions has passionately opposed this long-standing American right, which is enshrined in 5 decades of Supreme Court precedent. It protects women's health care and personal decisions involving reproductive rights. At a time when those rights face unprecedented assault, he has continued to condemn Roe v. Wade and the many court decisions upholding that case. Equally disturbing, Senator Sessions is supported by groups like Operation Rescue, who defend the murder of doctors and the vilification and criminalization of women. With him as Attorney General, American women would understandably feel less secure in these rights. On religious freedom, Senator Sessions has advocated for using a religious test to determine which immigrants can enter this country. He was an advocate of a ban on Muslims coming into the country during the past campaign. When this issue arose in committee, Senator Sessions was the only senator to argue forcefully for religious tests and against principles of religious liberty that have animated our republic since its founding. With Senator Sessions as
Senator Blumenthal, could you pull the microphone a little closer
it's hard
to you?
To hear.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And you can even
The mic keeps popping up.
you can
I'm happy to start over.
bend it down like this. Bend the end of it down.
It won't
Thank
stay.
you. I think I may have been more persuasive when you couldn't hear me than
No, see?
on citizenship. Senator Sessions has called for abolishing
This.
a time-honored tradition that dates back to Reconstruction. Birthright citizenship is the distinctly American concept that anyone born on our soil is a citizen of this country. We don't exclude people from citizenship based on nationality of their parents or grandparents. Senator Sessions disagrees, a position that most other Republicans think is extreme. With Senator Sessions as Attorney General, the Trump administration would be encouraged in attempting to deport American citizens who have raised families and spent their entire lives here. Senator Sessions declined my invitation at his nomination hearing to exercise moral and legal leadership and demonstrate his resolve to serve as this nation's legal conscience. He refused to reject the possibility of using information voluntarily provided by DACA applicants to deport them and their families. As a matter of fundamental fairness and due process, as I said at the time, when a dreamer provides information to our government after being invited to come out of the shadows, this information should not be used to deport that person. As Senator Sessions, as Attorney General, that sense of legal conscience would be lacking. On issues of discrimination and equal protection, Senator Sessions has publicly opposed marriage assaults involving bigotry or bias based on race, religion, or sexual orientation. He even defended President Trump's shocking admission on video of his pattern of engaging in sexual assault. Senator Sessions has said that public individuals may be fairly judged by assessing who supports them. But he is backed by groups with ties to white supremacists. He accepted an award and repeated campaign donations from groups whose founder openly promotes the goal of maintaining a, quote, European American majority, end quote, in our society. Neither award nor many other important parts of Senator Sessions' history was reported on the questionnaire he prepared for the Judiciary Committee. And I gave Senator Sessions an opportunity at his hearing and in follow-up questions to repudiate these groups, hate groups, and racist individuals who have endorsed his nomination and supported him in the past. Instead, he doubled down, saying that a man who has accused African Americans of excessive criminality and American Muslims of extensive ties to terrorism was, quote, a most brilliant individual, end quote. So I reached my decision to oppose this nomination with regret, because Senator Sessions is a colleague and a friend to all of us. Indeed, I have come to like him and respect him, as I think has been observed by others of my colleagues, through a number of shared experiences and common causes. He and I support law enforcement professionals. They serve our communities and nation with dedication and courage, and they deserve and need our support. He and I believe that individual corporate criminal culpability should be pursued more vigorously, and I have talked to him privately as well as in the course of his testimony about the need for prosecuting corporate wrongdoing, because ultimately jail and individual responsibility are the most effective deterrent against white-collar crime. But this job, this decision, this responsibility are different. Here, my disagreements with Senator Sessions stem from bedrock constitutional principles. And while I could envision deferring to presidential authority and supporting him for other positions, my objection to his nomination relates specifically to this particular essential, all-important, powerful job. At this historic moment, there's no doubt, and can be no doubt, about the responsibilities and immense power of the Attorney General of the United States to be true to our values and our rule of law, and to make sure that the President is never above the law and never thinks he is above the law. Reviewing his record, I cannot assure the people of Connecticut or the country that Jeff Sessions would be a vigorous champion of these rights and liberties, and therefore I stand in opposition to his nomination. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Before Senator Lee, we have a vote in 20 minutes, so I'd like to kind of plan for the rest of this committee meeting. Number one, I would like to keep the meeting going during, so Republicans, I hope, will take turns with me to go vote and chair the meeting. And then, so Republicans generally have spoken shorter times than Democrats, so if Senator Lee speaks about the usual time of Republicans and Democrats start on a 30-minute speech, you may want to think about letting a Republican speak ahead of you. The other thing is that we've had the 2-hour rule used against the Finance Committee. No Democrat showed up at the Finance Committee so that the Secretary of HHS could be voted out. I hope the way I've been running this committee, we would have the fairness on the part of the minority, let this committee go beyond 2 o'clock so we can finish today. If there's a reason to invoke the 2-hour rule, then I would suggest that just as soon as it can be conveniently called in the morning, we will have a meeting of the committee, and I will call for a roll call vote just as soon as we get a quorum, because I think everybody knows how everybody's going to vote, and out of the fairness that I've given to everybody to speak as long as they want to, and that's legitimate. That's the way we're going to run the committee. That's the way Senator Leahy ran the committee. Then I hope we can get done today yet. So, Senator Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Like many on this committee who have spoken today, I have disagreed with Senator Sessions a lot. In fact, I've been here 6 years. I'm just starting my second term. I was thinking I may well have disagreed with Senator Sessions as often as I have disagreed with any other single member of this committee, probably more than I've disagreed with any other Republican serving on this committee. Shortly after I arrived in the Senate 6 years ago, we had some of our first disagreements as we were dealing with the reauthorization of the USA Patriot Act and later the FISA amendments. We disagreed on those. We disagreed on amendments that I introduced with Senator Durbin to limit the intrusiveness of U.S. intelligence gathering activities relative to American citizens. We've continued to disagree on a number of things over the years. Senator Leahy and I introduced the USA Freedom Act, a law that was passed with bipartisan support in both houses of Congress, signed into law by President Obama, that ended the warrantless practice of bulk metadata collection with regard to American citizens. Senator Sessions was a vocal, vigorous opponent of the USA Freedom Act. Senator Sessions disagreed strongly with another top priority of mine, which involves criminal justice reform. Senator Durbin, Senator Whitehouse, and several others who serve on this committee joined with me in pushing forward a number of efforts to achieve criminal justice reform, including the Sentencing Reform and Corrections Act and the Smarter Sentencing Act. He opposed us on those. Senator Sessions has disagreed with me on a number of immigration reforms that I have supported. Senator Sessions opposed the work that I did with Senator Feinstein when she and I introduced the Due Process Guarantee Act, which is designed to make sure that the U.S. government cannot indefinitely detain U.S. citizens arrested on U.S. soil without charge or trial in violation of a whole host of constitutional rights and the fundamental concept of due process itself. He opposed us on that. Senator Sessions has opposed efforts that I've undertaken with Senator Leahy with regard to reforming a 1986 law called the Electronic Communications Privacy Act, a law that was passed when I was in the 9th grade, a law that was passed at a time when no one really knew what email was outside of a few circles inside government, the military, and a handful of elite universities. And it purports to give the government the power to read your emails without a warrant under certain circumstances, merely with the passage of time. Senator Sessions and I take different positions with regard to legislation supported by many, including Senator Sessions, regarding electronic communications transaction records. So Senator Sessions and I have a fundamentally different view toward the law and a whole host of issues. And on many of these issues, we're dealing with topics that cut to the core of at least constitutional policy, the spirit, if not also the letter, of what the Constitution requires. And yet, in this entire time that I've been at the United States Senate serving with Senator Sessions, with whom I have disagreed more times than I can even count. I've mentioned just a few of the instances in which he and I have disagreed. I have never once sensed any degree of disrespect toward me, my views, or the views of any of our colleagues. I have never once heard him refer to the views of a colleague, even a colleague who bitterly disagrees with him, who sincerely, aggressively disagrees with him on any of these or any of a whole host of other topics, as reflecting hostility toward the Constitution, antipathy toward the rights of Americans, toward any group. In fact, I have never seen Senator Sessions refer to any colleague or any other person with anything other than respect. I cannot say the same for every member of this body. In fact, I don't know that I have ever worked with another person who has a greater degree of respect for the opinions of others, who has a greater capacity to respect the fact that people of goodwill and strong intellect can come to different conclusions, whether in government or in any other context, as to how to solve a particular problem. I've never seen Senator Sessions raise his voice in anger toward a colleague. I have never seen Senator Sessions accuse someone of possessing ill motives toward any group or in any individual, even when he strongly disagrees with the conclusions they reach. This, I believe, is precisely the kind of human being we need to serve as the Attorney General of the United States, especially when, as is the case with Senator Sessions, these characteristics are bound up in a package of a man who has devoted his entire life to the law, to enforcing it, to protecting it, to defending it, and as a lawmaker, to improving it. Whether you agree with him or not, this is a man, Senator Sessions, who, as U.S. Attorney in Alabama, as Attorney General of the state of Alabama, and as a U.S. Senator, has shown over and over and over again that he has a deep and abiding love and respect for the law and the Constitution of the United States, that he has a deep commitment to the notion that the rule of law presupposes that our laws consist of words. Those words have meaning. You have to respect each word in order to respect the law, in order to guarantee that ours remains a system that operates under the rule of law, that laws govern us rather than the will and whim of individual human beings. This is part of what makes it so important to have someone who is independent, who has independence in his DNA, who has the spirit of respect for the rule of law, respect for one's fellow human beings, and yet a willingness to do what's right, even when it's difficult, especially when it's difficult. One of the things that I've never seen from Senator Sessions, in addition to those that I've already mentioned, is that I've never seen him blindly defer to what's easy, blindly follow those who would like to have him following them simply because they asked for it. He doesn't do that. That's not his style. It's not something he's capable of. No, Senator Sessions is someone who studies out each issue on his own, on its own merits, and then makes a decision for himself. There are very few people I know who have this characteristic to the degree that Senator Sessions has it. And this is exactly the kind of thing that we want our Attorney General to be able to do. Senator Sessions himself acknowledged the need for independence during his hearing, and I like the way he put this. He said that the Attorney General, quote, would have to resign before agreeing to execute a policy that the Attorney General believes would be unlawful or unconstitutional, close quote. Now, he means this. He means it. I know he means it, and I know he's capable of living up to it because this is how he's conducted himself in the United States Senate. And that's exactly the kind of person we need as our next Attorney General. I want to caution each of my colleagues against the instinct to either accuse or imply an accusation relative to someone's heart, relative to someone's intentions, simply because they happen to disagree with you on a question of policy or on a whole host of questions of policy. Respect for the rule of law itself and respect for the process that produces good law, I think, requires us to do better than to accuse someone of having hostility toward the rights of the American people or antipathy toward any group of people simply because that person doesn't share your view that a particular legislative solution might be the best course of action to take in that area. Senator Sessions is eminently qualified for this position. He'll be one of the most experienced, well-prepared attorneys general in the history of the United States after he's confirmed to this position. For this reason, I will be supporting his confirmation. I will be voting enthusiastically, resoundingly, yes, in committee and on the floor. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Next up, he's supposed to be Senator Coons is next up. He's in the bathroom. Why don't somebody get him?
Here comes Senator Coons. Senator Coons is next. In 9 minutes, I'll go vote, and so one of my colleagues chair while I'm gone, and I'll come right back. Senator Coons.
Thank you, Chairman Grassley, members of the committee. I appreciate the opportunity to weigh in on our deliberations today about the nomination of Senator Sessions to serve as Attorney General of the United States. I have gotten to know Senator Sessions in our 6 years of service together on this committee and through other vehicles. And I believe that serving as Attorney General of the United States is very different from serving as Senator. These are different roles with different priorities. And so I will say at the outset that Senator Sessions and I have worked constructively together on this committee on several important matters, including the reauthorization of the Victims of Child Abuse Act and restoring funding for the Federal Public Defender Service. But we have also disagreed about many issues fundamental to our values and the direction of this country. How is the office of Attorney General of the United States different from the office of United States Senator? I think that is a...
We don't have a quorum. We have to have at least 6 people. Is there anybody in the back room that makes a quorum?
You can ask consent to speak.
Yeah. You could ask consent to speak if you want to continue to speak, and we can continue.
Mr. Chairman, is your desire that we recess to all go vote and then return?
My
I'm
desire,
unclear on
we
what's
would
best.
continue through the vote.
Okay.
So
And in the absence of a quorum, is it the tradition of the committee to continue with deliberations?
by
I'm a
consent-
little unclear as to
by
the
consent,
procedural.
you can speak.
Okay, I mean, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We are
Yeah.
1 senator short of a quorum. Do we believe a senator to be nearby?
Do you,
Approximate?
by
2 minutes?
consent, by consent, you may speak. Do you ask consent to speak or not?
Mr. Chairman, I
presume
think
you're
I'd prefer to wait for a
I
quorum.
assume you're going to get the word you should not ask for consent to speak.
Mr. Chairman, I'd prefer to speak with a quorum present if possible.
Okay.
What's obvious, what's going on?
We stand at ease until we determine that we get a quorum or that we don't meet at all. It's my preference to continue till we get done today or
We could go and vote
tomorrow.
and come back and round up some members, maybe.
You know. If people in the majority don't know the importance of this meeting, then how can we expect the minority to consider the importance of the meeting?
Mr. Chairman, my understanding from staff is that there are several senators that are fairly close.
Okay. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Proceed with your speech.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate the presence of a quorum. I was beginning with an inquiry into the difference, the distinction between service as a United States Senator and service as Attorney General. Attorney General is our nation's top federal law enforcement official, but more is required of the Attorney General than a simple pledge to enforce the law. The Attorney General has tremendous power and influence to chart the strategy and priorities of the Justice Department and the deployment of its resources, which include over 100,000 employees and a more than $27 billion budget. It's often been said the Department of Justice is the nation's largest law firm and most potent of force against injustice. So in my view, the Attorney General of the United States...
Senator, I thought 6 was what it took for you to speak. It's actually 7. So we have 6 of you here. So you should probably just stop for a minute and we'll just see what happens here.
Here it is.
No, you don't have to show me. I take your word for it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I'm sure that Senator McConnell will make sure that people of the majority party know how important this meeting is.
Muslim ban. And on civil liberties, Senator Sessions has advocated for expanding the scope of government surveillance powers and has repeatedly opposed efforts to protect the privacy of American citizens. On torture, Senator Sessions has once again split from the mainstream of either party. He was one of only 9 senators to vote against the Detainee Treatment Act and was in the minority again in 2015 when he voted against the amendment sponsored by Senators McCain and Feinstein to prohibit interrogation techniques not authorized by the Army Field Manual. On voting rights, Senator Sessions has referred in the past to the Voting Rights Act as intrusive and praised the Supreme Court Shelby County decision as, quote, good news for the South, unquote. I thought it important that I read some from a very long letter from Coretta Scott King, She did not have the opportunity to testify when Senator Sessions was considered for a federal judgeship, and I believe there is value in hearing what her words were at that time, even today. And I will read just a few excerpts. This is from a statement of Coretta Scott King submitted to this committee, but not entered into the record at the time in 1986. And I quote, "Civil rights leaders, including my husband, have fought long and hard to achieve free and unfettered access to the ballot box. Mr. Sessions has used the awesome power of his office to chill the free exercise of the vote by black citizens in the district he now seeks to serve as a federal judge. This simply cannot be allowed to happen. Mr. Sessions' conduct as U.S. Attorney, from his politically motivated voting fraud prosecutions to his indifference towards criminal violations of civil rights laws, indicate he lacks the temperament, fairness, and judgment to be a federal judge. The Voting Rights Act was and still is vitally important to the future of democracy in the United States. I was privileged to join Martin and many others during the Selma to Montgomery March for Voting Rights in 1965. Martin was particularly impressed by the determination to get the franchise of blacks in Selma and neighboring Perry County." And I'm skipping. In fact, Martin anticipated from the depth of their commitment 20 years ago that a united political organization would remain in Perry County long after the other marchers had left. This organization, the Perry County Civic League, started by Mr. Turner and others, as Martin predicted, continued to direct the drive for votes and other rights. And in the years since the Voting Rights Act was passed, black Americans in Marion, Selma, and elsewhere have made important strides in their struggle to participate actively in the electoral process. The number of blacks registered to vote in key southern states has doubled since 1965. This would not have been possible without the Voting Rights Act. However, blacks still fall far short of having equal participation in our electoral process. Particularly in the South, efforts continue to be made to deny blacks access to the polls, even where they can constitute the majority of the voters. It has been a long uphill struggle to keep alive the vital legislation that protects the most fundamental right to vote. A person who has exhibited so much hostility to the enforcement of those laws and thus to the exercise of those rights should not be elevated to the federal bench." I'm skipping to the conclusion. Free exercise of voting rights is so fundamental to American democracy that we cannot tolerate any form of infringement of those rights. Of all the groups who have been disenfranchised in our nation's history, none has struggled longer or suffered more in the attempt to win the vote than its black citizens. No group has had access to the ballot box denied so persistently and intently. Over the past century, a broad array of schemes have been used in attempts to block the black vote. The range of techniques developed with the purpose of repressing black voting rights run the gamut from the straightforward application of brutality against black citizens who tried to vote to such legalized frauds as the so-called grandfather clause exclusions and rigged literacy tests. The actions taken by Mr. Sessions in regard to the 1984 voting fraud prosecutions represent just one more technique used to intimidate black voters and thus deny them this most precious of franchises. The investigations into the absentee voting process were conducted only in the black belt counties where blacks had finally achieved political power in local government. Whites had been using the absentee process to their advantage for years without incident. Then when Senator Sessions indicated in his response that he had not studied the issue or conducted research on it in many areas critical to my consideration. And frankly, I found these responses to be frustrating, coming from someone who has served as a public official for 3 decades. They give me concern either the nominee is not fully prepared for the critical post he may soon assume, or that our Senate confirmation process is not being approached with the deliberation it deserves. Even in the cursory responses I did receive to written questions, there were some responses that gave me great pause. In response to my question about whether internment of American citizens or residents is lawful, Senator Sessions stated in part, quote, "I am unaware of any proposal for internment of American citizens or residents. No person or groups of persons should be interned without a clear legal basis." Senator Sessions did state that he does not believe Korematsu should be relied upon as good law. But I am concerned that this response in its totality appears to leave open the possibility of the internment of American citizens. The episode in the Second World War of the mass incarceration of Americans of Japanese ancestry is a truly dark chapter in our history that we should never revisit, and I had looked for more clarity on this vital question. I've also asked Senator Sessions, both in our hearing and in writing, about the unconstitutional use of the hitching post to punish prisoners in Alabama during Senator Sessions' tenure as the Attorney General of the state of Alabama. In my written questions, I pointed out again, after having pressed him on this in our personal meeting and in the hearing, that the Civil Rights Division of the United States Department of Justice sent him 2 letters during his term of service as the Attorney General of the state of Alabama, advising that this practice was unconstitutional and should promptly stop. But Senator Sessions has refused to explain what his view of the hitching post is and why he did not intervene to stop this unconstitutional practice while he was the Attorney General of the state of Alabama. When I also asked in writing Senator Sessions' view of the Office of Legal Counsel's opinions, whether he agrees with prior guidance that they should provide, and I quote, candid, independent, and principled advice, even when that advice may be inconsistent with the desires of policymakers, unquote, Senator Sessions expressly did not address the portion of my question dealing with OLC opinions that are inconsistent with the desires of policymakers such as the President. When I asked Senator Sessions whether religious institutions, in particular such as mosques, should be targeted for warrantless surveillance, he chose to answer a different question, replying only that he did not, quote, believe that a building or organization should be targeted for surveillance because it is a religious institution, unquote. I have submitted a number of follow-up questions to Senator Sessions on these important issues, but have not yet received responses, and would respectfully ask that these questions be afforded the attention that such serious and now pressing matters deserve. I believe we should not proceed to a vote until these questions have been answered. Finally, colleagues, President Trump's actions over the course of the last week, and indeed the last day, have shined a brighter spotlight on the solemn responsibilities of the United States Department of Justice and the critical need for an independent Attorney General who can reach their own conclusions and, when necessary, stand up to the President. Last Wednesday, President Trump signed executive orders that include plans to build a costly wall at the southern border and announcing a massive expansion of interior enforcement. Improvements in border security and immigration enforcement are in our country's interest. That's why in 2013,